never expected the moment that changed everything to happen during a simple wedding rehearsal. We were standing inside a rustic barn decorated with warm string lights and fall flowers when I heard my daughter say something that stopped my breath. She leaned toward my son and whispered, "You know she is not good enough for you, right?" She said it with confidence, like she assumed the whole family agreed. She had no idea I was standing right behind her. For 2 years, I refused to accept his bride, Lila. I judged her before I ever gave her a real chance. But the look on Lila's face when she heard those words made something inside me shift. In that moment, I understood that my silence had been part of the problem, and now I had to decide what kind of mother I wanted to be. My name is Marianne Harlow, and I am the mother of the groom. My son, Evan, has always been the steady center of my life. After my husband passed away, Evan became the one person I leaned on. So when he brought Lila into our lives, I felt something I never wanted to admit. I felt threatened. Lila Hart was gentle, soft-spoken, and carried herself with a quiet kindness that I mistook for weakness. I convinced myself she was not strong enough for our loud and proud family. I told myself we were too different to ever blend, and instead of getting to know her, I held her at arm's length. My daughter, Claire, watched me closely and copied my attitude without hesitation. If I made a cold comment, she made a sharper one. If I kept my distance, she doubled it. Inside the barn, everyone was buzzing with excitement. The coordinator gave instructions, bridesmaids practiced their steps, and the florist added fresh flowers to the wooden arch. Lila tried to help with small tasks, offering a smile to anyone who looked her way, but Claire dismissed her again and again. "She is in the way," or "She is doing it wrong," always came out of her mouth before anyone else could answer. I watched Lila do her best to stay calm and polite. She never pushed herself into conversations. She never talked back. She simply kept trying. I told myself her quiet personality was the reason I did not connect with her, but deep down I knew better. I was afraid. I was afraid that if Evan built a life with her, I would be left behind. As we prepared to practice the aisle walk, I saw Lila glance at Evan with a mixture of love and nervousness. He squeezed her hand and smiled at her in a way that reminded me of how my husband once smiled at me. I should have been happy for him, but instead I felt resentment rising in my chest. I stood back, watching her, judging her, and pretending my coldness was not hurting anyone but her. I did not realize at the time that my daughter was using my behavior as permission to say whatever she wanted. That small detail would come back to hit me harder than I expected. What I did not know was that the next few minutes would force me to face everything I had been avoiding. I would hear a sentence from my own daughter that would open my eyes wider than they had been in years. And for the first time, I would see Lila not as the woman taking my place, but as the woman my son truly loved. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. It helps the stories reach more people. The rehearsal started with what should have been a simple walkthrough, but the tension in the barn grew with every passing minute. The wooden floor creaked under our steps, and the warm lights hanging from the rafters cast a soft glow over the rows of chairs. Everyone tried to follow the coordinator's instructions, but I could feel Claire's irritation building the moment she laid eyes on Lila. She kept sighing loudly and making comments that seemed harmless at first, but carried an edge that cut deeper than she realized. When the coordinator asked the bridal party to line up, Claire criticized how Lila held her bouquet, saying, "If you cannot even hold flowers right, how are you supposed to walk down the aisle without messing up the whole thing?" The words hung in the air, sharp and unnecessary. Lila forced a small smile and adjusted her grip, but her shoulders tightened. She looked down for a moment before lifting her head again, trying to stay focused. I knew she heard the insult. Everyone did. I pretended to be busy adjusting my shawl, pretending I did not see the pain on her face. But it was there, clear as day. As we moved through the steps, the coordinator told Evan to join the groomsmen at the front so they could practice their cues. Lila stayed behind with the bridesmaids, trying to help organize the order. She spoke softly, offering suggestions, but Claire kept interrupting her. "No, that is not how this works. she insisted. "Please just stay out of it. You are making everything harder." A few bridesmaids exchanged awkward glances but stayed quiet. They did not want to get involved. Lila took a step back and folded her hands in front of her, retreating into herself. I watched her move away from the group, not because she wanted to, but because she felt pushed. Evan glanced over when he noticed she was quiet, but the coordinator distracted him with more instructions. I noticed how his expression shifted, like he sensed something was wrong, but he did not yet know what. When the coordinator dismissed everyone for a short break, Evan walked toward the drink table to grab a bottle of water. Claire followed him quickly, her heels tapping against the wood in an impatient rhythm. I saw her grab his arm and pull him aside near the barn doors. I did not mean to overhear their conversation, but they were not exactly being subtle. Claire said, "Evan, why are you doing this? You are making a mistake. She is not good enough for you. Everyone sees it except you." Her voice was sharp, confident, filled with the same judgment I had taught her. The problem was that I finally saw the ugliness of it when I heard it out loud. Lila was only a few steps away, standing behind a wooden beam, waiting for the photographer to call her for pictures. She froze when she heard Claire's voice. She did not walk away. She did not interrupt. She just stood there, holding the practice bouquet against her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor as if she were bracing herself against the words. I looked at her face and saw something I had never paid attention to before. She was not angry. She did not have a dramatic reaction. She looked quietly hurt in a way that pulled something deep inside me. It was the kind of hurt that came from trying over and over again and finally reaching a breaking point. She blinked a few times, trying to hold herself together, and I could tell she was fighting back tears she did not want anyone to see. That was when it hit me. My coldness had made her feel like she did not belong. Claire's cruelty had grown because she believed she had my approval. And the worst part was that Lila never once defended herself. She just kept trying to be accepted by a family that gave her every reason to walk away. For the first time, I felt ashamed of the example I had set. I had been so busy protecting my place in Evan's life that I failed to see he had chosen a woman who truly loved him. I failed to see that the problem was never Lila. The problem was my fear of losing my son. I watched Claire stand there with a smirk on her face, waiting for Evan to agree with her. I watched Lila silently absorb the blow, and I knew something had to change right then. I could not stay silent any longer. My silence was the very thing that allowed Claire to speak so freely. My silence was why Lila stood alone in a room full of people who should have cared for her. The conflict was not just between Claire and Lila. The real conflict was inside me, and I finally understood that the next words I spoke would decide whether I stayed a part of the problem or finally became part of the solution. I stood there for a moment that felt much longer than it really was, watching my daughter tear someone down who had done nothing to deserve it. Claire kept pushing, her voice rising with confidence as she said, "You could do so much better than her, Evan. You know that. Everyone knows it." She said it like she was speaking a universal truth, like every person in that barn was secretly thinking the same thing. But as she looked around for approval, she did not see what I saw. She did not see the way the bridesmaids shifted uncomfortably or how the groomsmen exchanged small glances. She did not see the way Evan tensed and looked away, embarrassed that his own sister was behaving like this. And she did not see me, standing only a few steps behind her, taking in the scene with the kind of clarity that cut straight through pride. My eyes moved from Claire's angry face to Lila's quiet hurt. Lila held the bouquet close to her chest, her fingers tight around the ribbon. Her eyes were locked on the floor, as if she were afraid that looking up would make the pain show even more. She looked small in that moment, but not weak. She looked like someone who had taken enough pain for one lifetime and was trying her hardest not to break in front of people who barely gave her a chance to belong. And then something inside me shifted in a way I could not ignore. I took one breath, then stepped forward. My shoes clicked on the wooden floor, making a sound that grabbed everyone's attention. Claire finally turned and saw me standing there. Her confident expression faded instantly. She opened her mouth like she was about to explain herself, but I raised my hand slightly, and she stopped talking. I looked at her directly and said, "That is enough." My voice was steady and firm, not loud, not angry, just certain. That alone was enough to make the entire group fall silent. I could feel every eye in the barn turn toward me. Claire blinked, confused, expecting me to take her side like I always had. She said, "Mom, I am only being honest." But I shook my head. "No," I said, "you are being unkind." She stared at me, stunned, because I had never spoken to her that way in front of others. Then I turned toward Lila. She had finally lifted her head. Her eyes met mine with a mixture of fear, surprise, and a little hope she tried to hide. That look pierced straight through me. In that moment, I saw the truth I had been avoiding. She was not the problem. I was. I walked toward her slowly so she would not feel cornered. When I reached her, I lowered my voice, but everyone could still hear. "Lila," I said, "I owe you an apology." Her eyes widened slightly as she tried to understand what was happening. "I judged you before I knew you," I said. "I let my fears and assumptions decide who you were, and I let my daughter follow my example. That was wrong." Lila swallowed hard, and her fingers loosened around the bouquet. She did not say anything, but she listened, which somehow made the moment even heavier. I continued, "You have shown patience and kindness again and again. You stayed respectful even when we gave you every reason not to. That says more about your character than any of us here." Behind me, Claire let out a frustrated breath. "Mom, why are you acting like she is the victim?" she demanded. "She does not fit this family." I turned back to her. "She fits the family Evan is trying to build," I said, "and that is what matters." Claire stepped back slightly, as if the words physically pushed her. She had never heard me say anything that firm in her life. Evan walked closer, standing behind Lila with his hands on her shoulders, showing support without saying a word. I felt the weight of his gaze on me, and I knew he was waiting to see if I meant what I said, or if I would retreat back into old habits. So I finished with the words I should have spoken long ago. "I was wrong," I said, "and today I am choosing to make it right." The barn felt different after that. The tension loosened. The air felt lighter. Lila finally breathed normally again, her shoulders relaxing just a little. She whispered a soft thank you, and it made my chest tighten in a way I had not expected. I realized then that the turning point was not only about defending her, it was about becoming a better mother, a better example, and a better person than I had been for the past 2 years. I understood that the next steps in this family's life depended on honesty, not pride, and this time, I was ready to let go of the fear I had been holding on to and step into the truth with both feet. The moment after I spoke seemed to stretch across the entire barn. Everyone stood frozen, unsure of what would happen next. Claire looked as if someone had knocked the air out of her. She had expected me to stand with her, to back her up, to continue the cold pattern we had created together. Instead, she watched me defend the woman she believed I hated. Lila stood still, her fingers gently brushing the petals of the bouquet, her breath unsteady as the embarrassment slowly faded into quiet disbelief. Evan stepped forward, placing his hand on her back in a way that showed he had been waiting years to hear someone in his family publicly defend the woman he loved. I saw a mixture of relief and gratitude in his expression, and for the first time, his eyes softened toward me, not as a child looking for approval, but as a man seeing his mother finally grow. The barn felt different now. The warm lights above us seemed brighter, as if they were reflecting the shift happening inside every person watching. The coordinator cleared her throat softly, unsure whether to continue with the rehearsal. The groomsmen exchanged glances, mostly impressed, and a few bridesmaids looked at Lila with new respect. No one dared to speak first, as if afraid that talking would break the new balance forming in the room. Claire, however, could not stay silent. She stepped toward me with frustration rising in her face. "So that is it?" she demanded. "You embarrass me in front of everyone to defend her?" Her voice echoed across the barn, bouncing off the wooden beams. I felt a familiar urge to calm her and take responsibility for her feelings, something I had done her whole life. But this time, I stayed steady. "I am not embarrassed," I said calmly. I am correcting something I should have corrected long ago. Claire stared at me, shocked by the firmness in my tone. She opened her mouth again, but Evan stepped between us before she could continue. He said, "Claire, this is not about you. It never was." His voice was not harsh, but it carried enough weight to stop her. She shook her head and walked toward the barn doors, pushing them open with more force than needed before disappearing into the cold afternoon light that spilled in behind her. Once she was gone, the energy in the barn shifted again. Lila let out a small breath she had been holding, and her eyes met mine. She did not look angry or triumphant. She looked relieved. She whispered, "Thank you," in a voice so soft it almost disappeared into the sounds of people adjusting their positions and clearing their throats. I nodded once, feeling emotions rise in me that I had not expected. I was surprised by how light I felt, as if letting go of my pride released a weight I did not know I was carrying. Evan wrapped his arms gently around Lila from behind and pressed his cheek to her temple, showing the room that no matter what challenges stood in their way, he was committed to her. The coordinator, still uncertain but trying to regain control, said we should run the aisle walk again. Everyone nodded and began moving into place, but this time, something was different. The room no longer felt divided. The groomsmen made friendly comments toward Lila. A few bridesmaids straightened her dress and told her she was doing great. Even the photographer, who had been waiting patiently in the corner, smiled at her with encouragement. She stood taller now, holding the bouquet with confidence. The quiet sadness in her eyes had faded, replaced by a calm strength I had never noticed before. She walked toward the altar with more grace than earlier, and when she passed me, she paused just long enough to give me a small smile. It was the kind of smile that said she did not expect acceptance, but she was grateful for it. When the photographer asked for a family picture, I felt a brief hesitation. For years, I had chosen to stand apart from her, physically and emotionally. But this time, I stepped beside her willingly. I stood close enough that she knew my presence was intentional. I rested my hand gently on her back, and she did not pull away. The photographer lifted his camera and said, "Perfect," before snapping the picture. In that moment, it finally felt like the beginning of a real family, not the fractured one I had helped create. It was not dramatic or loud. It was quiet and simple, but sometimes the quiet moments hold the most power. As the picture was taken, I realized I had not just defended Lila. I had finally chosen the kind of mother I wanted to be. The next day arrived with calm morning air and soft winter light drifting across the fields. The rustic barn had been transformed overnight. Long tables were set with white linens. Mason jars filled with wildflowers lined the aisle, and candles flickered along wooden beams overhead. Everything looked warm and inviting, the kind of setting people dream of for their wedding. As guests began to arrive, I found myself watching Lila more carefully than ever before. She moved around the room, greeting people politely, checking in with the coordinator, and offering small smiles despite the tension from the day before. She carried herself with quiet grace, not trying to impress anyone, simply trying to make the day beautiful for the man she loved. I realized then how blind I had been. While I had spent years judging her, she had spent those same years trying to build bridges with patience I did not deserve. As the ceremony time grew closer, I watched Evan getting ready with his groomsmen. His hands shook a little as he fixed his tie, and he kept glancing toward the doorway where he knew Lila would soon appear. When he saw me watching him, he smiled, but it was a nervous smile, filled with hope. I walked over and adjusted the collar of his shirt like I used to when he was a boy. He whispered, "Thank you for what you said yesterday, Mom. I needed that more than you know." I felt my throat tighten, not out of sadness but out of relief. I gave him a small nod and told him, "You chose a good woman, Evan. I see that now." His expression softened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was giving him something useful instead of something heavy. When the music began, everyone took their seats. I walked down the aisle when it was my turn, feeling the eyes of friends and family on me. It did not make me nervous. It made me proud. I had spent years holding on to fear, but that fear no longer controlled me. When the barn doors opened and Lila appeared at the end of the aisle in her simple white dress, the entire room quieted. She looked breathtaking, not because of the dress or the flowers, but because she looked genuinely happy. She did not look at me first. She looked at Evan, but when she passed the row where I stood, she gave me a gentle smile, and that small gesture hit me harder than any speech could. It was forgiveness. It was acceptance. It was a chance to begin again. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. The pastor spoke about commitment and partnership. Evan and Lila held hands tightly as they exchanged vows. Lila's voice trembled at first, but when Evan squeezed her hand, her courage settled in, and she finished her promises with steady words. I watched them closely, feeling a mixture of joy and regret. Joy because I could finally see what everyone else had seen from the beginning. Regret because I had wasted so much time keeping her at a distance. When they kissed, and the guests erupted into applause, I clapped louder than I expected. It was not for show. It was because I finally felt peace. At the reception, people laughed and talked around long wooden tables. Claire kept her distance for most of the evening, still processing everything that had happened. She made polite conversation, but avoided Lila, and avoided me. I did not push her. Everyone grows at their own pace, and I knew it would take time for her to accept the shift in our family. Meanwhile, I watched Lila move gracefully between guests, offering hugs and gratitude for their presence. She danced with Evan under the warm lights strung across the barn ceiling, and I could see how completely he adored her. When it came time for my toast, I stood up holding a glass of sparkling cider. Hands shook a little, but my voice did not. I said, "Today I am not losing a son. I am gaining someone who cares for him with a level of kindness I did not understand until now. I welcome you into our family, Lila, not because I have to, but because I want to." There was no dramatic reaction. Instead, the barn filled with quiet warmth. Lila wiped a tear and hugged me afterward. It was a hug that did not ask for anything. It simply gave comfort. It made me understand that acceptance is not a gift given to others. It is a gift you give yourself. As the night ended and guests drifted out into the cool air, I stood watching Evan and Lila talking softly near the doorway. I felt grateful for the lesson life had handed me. Sometimes the person you doubt the most becomes the person your family needs the most. And sometimes the hardest truth to face is recognizing that your own fears created walls that never had to exist. I walked over to them, hugged them both, and told them I was proud. It was a simple moment, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. Thank you for listening to this story. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from.